an education company. I am very pleased to be speaking with Andrew Farah, CEO of Density, this morning. Andrew, first of all, it looks like you're in a beautiful space this morning. Please introduce yourself for those who aren't familiar with you and the work that you do.
Sure. Normally I joke that it's a Zoom background, but I've already used that joke. So,
You already got me with that one this morning.
so my name is Andrew Farah. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Density. And we build a system that can in real time tell you how many humans are inside of a building. We do that without invading privacy, and we can do that across like hundreds of millions of square feet of space. So you may hear my dog in the background, just FYI.
Well, Andrew has spoken a number of times at DisruptCRE's past, and I think that generally what you guys do is so interesting and helps kind of the commercial real estate world peek into some of what's possible with just understanding behavioral analytics of people through using sensor technology. This kind of whole notion of smart buildings is right in your arena. You guys are have a helping hand in kind of making a lot of what's to come possible. And I think that what's most interesting for me is to kind of peek into your brain a little bit today and just hear about some of the conversation that you've been having around technology, yours specifically, but sensors in general, you know, on the whole, and how they're going to be playing a part next piece
Sure.
of our commercial real estate tech journey, if you will.
So we have been talking to a lot of our customers and clients. Typically, we work with organizations that have, you know, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of square feet of space. So you can think sort of Fortune 10, Fortune 50, Fortune 1000 organizations that just have a lot of real estate. And usually they're trying to understand how all of that real estate is being used. What's really interesting is post-COVID, if you look at the foot traffic data, it just plummeted. It was through the floor. And what has started to happen is organizations are having conversations about how to bring employees back to work safely. And the consensus is that there is not consensus. We've published some of the interviews that we've done. We do some of these interviews live. The reality is that if you were in workplace experience 6 weeks ago, you're now in workplace safety. And that's a totally different ballgame. There's questions around liability. There's questions around how strict is too strict. There's all these different concerns around what do you implement and how do you apply. And I can talk about some of the actual like tactical things that people are doing, like removing furniture and limiting the number of people in elevators and a whole host of other things. But if you've been in workplace experience for the last 11 years, it's about to be totally weird for the next 18 months. So at least as far as we can tell.
You know, I want to say the word debate, but I guess had debated with people over the last few weeks about just bringing people back to work and even the design. And people talk about how gone are the days of an open work, floor plan, which we've been talking about for a long time anyway. But it would make sense to me that in the next 18 months, even 2 years, the strategy that we set forth looking into the next few years might be really different than a long-term strategy, if you look out to 5 years plus. And I think it's kind of this weird in-between for commercial real estate where we're used to hedging long-term bets and making investment, whether it's in the physical infrastructure of the building or in a workplace, for the long-term and foreseeable future. And so what do you think about that? Are we planning for a long-term, or are we kind of, it sounds like your take on this is we have to look into the immediate?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone knows what's going to happen 12 to 18 months from now. I think everyone is focused on the next 8 to 16 weeks. And I think that's because people are here's what we think is going to happen. There's going to be asymmetric return to work or return to the office.
Yeah.
I talked to a customer yesterday. 60,000 employees are now work from home. They have to bring back 60,000 employees. Those offices, they operate offices in 60 countries. Depending on which governor you had in the U.S., depending on which state official was managing safety inside your particular region, you may not be coming back for 6 months. You might be coming back in 3 weeks. And so, anyway, I just think that there's a number of surprising circumstances where some companies are trying to figure out whether or not they have to start implementing technology or methodologies or testing now, and whether or not they have to do that in a few months. I'm not sure if we lost Mariel. Are you still there, Mariel?
I'm still here.
Okay.
I wanted to give people a quick wide shot on your beautiful scenery.
Okay, gotcha. So anyway, I think there's organizations that are thinking like, okay, what do we do now? And then there are organizations that are thinking about this like long term. And my recommendation is probably to talk to other people who are like the experts in safety right now. And there's only sorry, go ahead.
No, you please go ahead.
There's only a handful of experts in safety right now, and they are essential businesses. Grocery is an expert in safety. Pharmacies, an expert in safety. Lowe's, hardware stores, experts in safety. And it's because they're the only ones, that's my dog. Hospitals, obviously. Yeah. They're the only ones that are actively and in the real world dealing with keeping people safe when they show up. And so, I think anyone who's trying to figure out how to do long-term planning is not spending their time on the right thing.
Sure. Like, but I think it's a worthy conversation, right? Because when you think about bringing people back to work, 60 million, 60,000, 60 people, right? Depends on the size of your company, but we're all in the same boat of how do you functionally make that work. And so while people are, talking about how the nature of co-working may no longer be a viable business model, just from a floor plan standpoint, this densified kind of co-working.
Indy, sorry, hold on 1 second. I just gotta.
No worries.
Just gotta get my dog.
Maybe we'll get a peek of this little guy.
Sorry about that.
He didn't want to join us?
No, he went inside. Sorry, you were saying.
No, it's all good. I just think that kind of the layout of any given office design as we transition back into work naturally will have to, first of all, of course, like you said, it won't be everyone all at once. People will have to have more kind of defined workplaces and boundaries from a spatial standpoint, but creating so much more space per every individual from a long-term basis when you think about real estate probably isn't going to be sustainable and realistic throughout, once the threat of public safety has passed and we kind of return to a normally densified population. I agree with you. I think that those things are so speculative, but it is interesting conversation to have. So
well, there's two things that are happening. So there are organizations that believe, and we're talking about within the same company, believe that shared space is dead.
Right.
So hot desking, hoteling, space that, where you have, I use the same desk that you may, and I just sort of bring my stuff, that it's dead. There are other parts of the organization that think the opposite, that shared space is the solution. The mechanism by which you can safely and consistently clean space, where you have a clean desk space, is actually something that people are frankly really excited about. And I heard yesterday from an executive that COVID-19 is one of the largest change agents in the history of the company's since the company's founding. DocuSign was taking 12 months to get implemented. It got turned on in 48 hours, like company-wide. remote work for teams where managers were concerned about whether or not they could be productive from a distance. All of a sudden, those same managers are coming back and saying, this is immensely productive. So you've got all these things that are driving change that didn't exist before. And that's I think, very exciting for some, and it's very scary for others.
Of course, of course. Can you talk about, just generally, outside of the current state of life, the power of what you guys do? Because it's a super interesting function that you guys perform. And I think there's probably a lot of misconception generally about building sensors, what it means, why people implement them. And I think for some probably seems out there into the future and kind of maybe doesn't even really, this sounds so crazy because we know that you guys have been performing operations for quite a while. Building sensors have been around for quite a while. Sensors across industries have been around for quite a while. But I think there's this kind of like futuristic, that doesn't really exist yet type of notion out in the general public. So talk to us about what you guys do normally and how you provide value for the real estate industry.
Sure. Yeah. So I guess I should just quickly mention the way the system works. We mount a device above a point of entry, kind of like a nicely designed shower head. My head of marketing hates when I call it that. It looks like an Apple TV, and it looks downward, and then it bounces infrared laser light off of objects and humans as they walk beneath or through a doorway. And then as light returns or bounces off sort of the top of their head and their arms and the things that they're bringing with them, we measure that as a height value. And that height value allows us to do contiguous machine learning. So direction, collisions, whether or not you're on a phone call, these are all things that, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Those are all things that end up typically tricking camera-based systems. And we are not a camera-based system. So ours is anonymous by design, meaning we can't tell if you're the same person. If you walk back through the same door, we're not gonna be able to say, I've seen that person before. And the reason that's relevant is it allows us to go into secure facilities where anonymous by design is actually a critical feature. So we work with the federal government. We work with very large tech companies where they're in facilities where IP is really critical. And all of these organizations are now shifting to measure, essentially cap headcount. So it's going to be fascinating as people come back. They're setting alerts based on how many people are allowed on the floor.
Right.
And then they will push notifications to safety teams or to HR as soon as it starts to approach that threshold. And if it exceeds, they'll send an escalation alert to a broader team. We have other companies that are actually going to be using a display to do a stop, like a red light, yellow light, green light, for whether or not you can actually enter the floor or building based on the number of humans that are in the space at the moment.
That makes a lot of sense.
So I think like organizations are starting to try to adapt to what it means to bring employees back to the office safely. And the thing that I think that remains to be seen is what is like the set of strategies that work, because there's no company that's going to bring everybody back at the same time. Everybody is going to do waves. Well,
I think it's interesting in our industry, just because when you think about a commercial real estate portfolio, and especially here in New York, real estate owners are responsible, right? They hold a high threshold of liability for almost anything and everything. And so there's a level of preparedness, I think, beyond the scope of what people realize just from an outward perspective, that portfolio owners have in times of crisis, and especially those large portfolio owners and even large global real estate services firms who have seen crisis take shape in so many ways around the world. Of course, not to this scale, but they've had historically to work through so many different things. And so there's a nature of preparedness for safety and security and communication and all of those things, I think, a little bit farther than, people realize in the commercial real estate space.
Well, communication, if you don't mind, I just want to mention something about communication.
Sure, yeah.
This is actually a two-sided problem. So people are thinking about it as like bringing people back to work or to the office safely. The reality is that how safe a place is and how safe people think it is are two different problems. So it doesn't actually matter how safe you make the office or space. What matters is how much people believe you. And that's extremely hard to deal with because you have to convince. I mean, think about it this way. I'm going to tell my dog to lay down. Indy, lay down. Okay. Think about it this way. You've got 50,000 employees who are now working from home. Almost by legal mandate, must work from home. And let's call them like white collar workers. You know, they're able to do most of their work from home. They demonstrate that they are as productive, if not more productive, from home. All of a sudden, the company says, okay, it's been lifted, come on back. And all of the workers who have families say, you know what, I think I'd prefer to stay. And they say, well, what do you mean you prefer to stay? I was like, well, I just don't want to, like, it's really early. I don't know if I want to come back to the office because I have kids. I've got an older father who lives with me. I'm just like not ready to come back, and I can be just as productive as demonstrated by the last 2 months at home. I'm not coming back into the office. So the point is, it doesn't matter how safe the office is. What matters is, can you convince people to come back?
Right.
And that is an exercise in communication, which I think is one of your points.
Absolutely. We have a bunch of questions already, and I want to make sure we have time to take some of them. I'm going to actually hide myself so people can see you in just this slide that I pulled up, just because we have some questions on privacy.
Sure.
Andy, thank you for being such an active participant. I see that you've resolved some of your own questions just through Andrew chatting with us. However, I want to show you guys. I'm going to hide.
Are you still there, Mariel? We can't hear you. Indy, come here, bud. There's this awesome 2-year-old. Wes, can I grab that from you? Thank you so much. That's really nice of you. So he brought me coffee, and my dog is wandering around. Into and out of a space. As humans walk into and out of a space, you can see essentially in real time what this is essentially depth data. So that's bouncing infrared laser light off of objects as they move beneath it. And then what we can do is make sense of what's human and what's not human, which is actually immensely helpful because humans are extraordinarily weird. Why bother if not for limiting numbers of occupants for health purposes? Yeah, I would just say generally, like, most of our customers are interested in being able to generate data that is extremely accurate without invading privacy, and that's a fine line to walk. I don't know if you've ever tried to deploy a bunch of cameras that are mounted above an employee's desk, but if you ever do, one of the things that's very interesting is that the employees will start to destroy the cameras. They'll put tape over top of them, they'll pull them down, and we found them in urinals and a whole bunch of other places. So point is, just because a company has the right to monitor its employees doesn't mean that it has the cultural imperative or clout to do so. One of the questions is, also, by the way, Mariel, if you're talking, I'm not going to be able to hear you. Humans are weird in what way? So humans, people like bump into each other. They take phone calls. They linger. They bring bicycles and bags, boxes, other B words. If you're trying to make sense of human behavior, even at a doorway where you've got sort of a choke point that's sort of pushing people through, behavior is not normalized. So you don't have consistency as people walk through a door. And teaching humans are extraordinarily good at counting people. Like, we're very good at being able to say, oh, that's a human, and like that's a human with a hat on. Computers are very bad at that. There's actually there's an article that we wrote called AI is not magic. It's just manual labor and math. If you Google AI is not magic density, you'll sort of see a breakdown of how and why computers are so bad at counting people. Yeah, so anyway.
We'll put that in the comments so people can refer back. And I'm also going to throw in a great video that we have on DisruptCRE.com that Andrew did called People Are Weird. That slide I just showed before is from that presentation. And it just talks a lot about the, common misconceptions of employees in their workplace, feeling like you had said earlier, they're ripping them down. They feel like it's sometimes an invasion of their privacy, but the images we showed earlier are kind of what the camera sees. It's not a particular individual, like Andrew said. You're not going to say, "Oh, hey, I recognize you from that camera or that surveillance." It is anonymized, and Andy, that was one of your questions, I see. So anonymous by design, that's the whole idea. Andrew, what are some of the things that kind of have surprised you over the last many weeks, either that you've heard people talking about or technology being put to work in unusual ways?
Emergent need. So we have heard from grocery stores, pharmacies, hardware stores who actually have legal limits to the number of humans that are allowed inside of a space. One of the interesting things is that if you look at the federal guidelines, politics aside for a second, there is essentially a group of people that are working on federal guidelines for best practices in return to, when you're reopening the economy. And one of the things that I think people don't realize is, or maybe they do, but is currently being recommended at a federal level, is that you've got a cap of 10 people. So you're going to go through phases. And so like right now it's just essential businesses. And those essential businesses are now, they're like currently required to make sure that they've got a limit on the number of people inside of a space. So you can imagine head count per square foot. Phase one, there's going to be reopening of like a handful of spaces. And it's only if you hit certain criteria. Do you have enough testing? Do you have enough hospital capacity? And have you seen a downward trend in new cases? This is American, so not global, but American. Phase two, if you sort of achieve those things, you get to enter phase one. If for some period of time you have remained safe, all those things remain true, that means that you can then move into phase two. And phase two is 50 people. Your capacity is limited to 50 people. And then you get to move into phase three. So point is, the number of humans in space is about to become incredibly important to the entire economy.
Right.
And for the first time in history, at least insofar as we've been able to communicate about it like this, the economy has shrunk to just a handful of businesses. Grocery, pharmacy, hospitals, and those that can operate digitally. And I think that anyone that says that they know what's going to happen is probably making it up. Like we have no idea. And so mostly it's like, can you adapt such that you are a counter-cyclical business? Can you adapt such that there is more need in the event that there is a there is a recession than there was during a market boom? And frankly, and this isn't to scare workplace design or workplace experience or whatever, but I would say like if you work in workplace experience right now, like that's a job that exists in boom times. Like workplace experience is workplace safety now, and it will be at least for the next 2 years.
Right.
And
like you said.
Also consolidation of real estate, if you've got 100,000 employees and only 30,000 of them come back and the rest of them remain working from home, what do you think is going to happen to the real estate industry? I mean, right now, no new leases are getting signed. That's because nobody can tour new leases. So if you're in commercial real estate and you're a broker, like you have to be thinking 18 months from now. And like, what happens if you don't have any business for the next 6 months? Anyway, I don't
right,
know.
And we talked about last week's segment that some the Board of Realtors is lobbying to help brokers be deemed essential so that they can capture virtual content and 3D tours and things like that and still transact. And we'll of course see more and more of that as people are able to go to work. But there are liability waivers that they sign, just, you know, saying that they, to the best of their knowledge, do not have coronavirus. It is crazy that we don't have access to more testing to be sure about these things. So,
but if you think about it from the buyer's perspective, like we're a corporate entity that wants to buy office space when we need it.
Sure.
Right now, our need for office space has disappeared because everyone's working from home. And number two, like the lease terms that are typical, you know, 3, 5, 10, 15 year on a $1 million asset is just not a decision that all that's on hold. Like all new projects are on hold. I don't think anybody's getting rid of real estate in the next 6 months for the most part, unless they go under, but new real estate, new projects, those are on hold.
I want to quickly, I know you have a couple more minutes. I want to just, I wanted to pull this up, this recent Medium article, see if you wanted to talk about any particular points in here. And then I'll share some resources with those folks online so that they can circle back with materials, this article, other things we've mentioned in the segment.
Sure. Yeah, two things to mention. One, this article is a we didn't want to just sort of put our opinion out there. We wanted to just sort of like talk to people who are actually dealing with this. And actually, if you can scroll down, Mariel, you'll be able to see, and maybe not, maybe it's just a screenshot, but if you go to Medium or if you look up how to bring 82 million US employees back to the office.
Or just a screenshot with this one.
But
I'll link it.
No, it's okay. What you'll see is essentially just quotes, and they're quotes from a lot of different people who are working in global real estate. And the large takeaway is that there isn't a consensus yet. So I'll give you one example. You know, what do you do with elevators? You've got high rises where you've got thousands of employees that have to be transported north. How do you do that if you have to limit the cab to 2 people? You won't be starting your days until 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock. So I think there are just things that like don't seem obvious to us right now that are soon to be problems as soon as we start to come back. And I would encourage people to frankly try to find others who are in the industry just to understand what their executive teams are discussing. I mean, that's another one. Who on your executive team goes back to the office first? Total set of questions that like some companies are like, oh, no. Like from a public standpoint, you should know our leaders lead, you know, they go first. And I think that's a valid and awesome thing. Like I really do. But the reality is if you're running a $100 billion company, there's a risk team inside that company that's thinking about what that executive team does and where they physically go. And when it comes to protecting shareholder value, like there's going to be all sorts of questions about whether or not chief executives and their direct reports are even allowed back into the office in the first 6 months.
Right.
So anyway, that one's a good article. And then also we spoke with the global head of real estate for CBRE, Peter Van Emberg. You can find that on our site, density.io. I think it's under webinars. But he has some, you know, really interesting perspectives on how this is all going to shake out.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll make sure to we'll make sure to link some of these things in the comments so people can refer back with you. And I really appreciate your time this morning. And you know, until next time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mariel.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. Take care. All right, I'm gonna invite Manuela up to share with us this morning. Manuela, can you hear us? Let's see. So for those of you asking, I am going to link Andrew, a couple of talks that Andrew has done. It is really about educating employees in any given workspace where there are sensors or any sort of kind of smart building technology where it's a question of privacy. So I think, like he said, a lot of the essential workers, especially today, their job is around communication, workplace experience. It's about communication and safety. In a general sense, of course, privacy when it comes to building sensors is always about educating tenants about what, about what their day-to-day experience is, what information the building is capturing about them, all of that good stuff. Let me make sure we can connect with Manuela. For those of you who don't know, she just recently did a talk with us and Unisu Connect, and I'm going to make sure to link that afterwards as well. But she is the co-founder of Alpha Inc. Let me make sure we can see her. Manuela, can you hear us? All right, everybody, we are just having a little bit of technical issues getting Manuela up, but she is going to join us any minute. And so in the meantime, let me see. El Norris, we will be sharing, this will be available as a video after our stream today. And I'll make sure to add these links in the comments section. And let's see. All right, here she is. There she is. All right, yes, Facebook to the rescue.
Facebook to the rescue. Good morning. Hey, good morning. How's it going?
On the East Coast with me as well, right?
Or where are you? New York City.
Okay,
so,
yes.
Right in the middle of it.
So close, but so far away. So,
where are you now?
I'm also in New York. Actually, last time I saw Manuela, she was just getting off a flight from Mexico, and she came off the flight and she filmed a great presentation. I think it was like you were super jet lagged and you still did an incredible job. So, Manuela,
and I think I actually got coronavirus on that day on immigration.
Well, you're because I'm assuming you are okay.
No, I recovered. It was awful, but and my initial symptoms, they weren't even corona symptoms. So a lot of doctors just told me to like go on with my life, and then I had to fall back with all of the respiratory symptoms. But I still it's been I don't know, maybe a month or a month and a half since we last spoke.
That was
2 months. Yeah, it was like the first week of March, and I haven't been able to be tested to this day.
Wow, that's nuts. Well, I'm so glad that you're okay and you're here with us this morning. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do, who you are?
Sure. So I'm Manuela Seve. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Alpha. Alpha is a B2B marketplace, and we connect companies to the visual arts. So we work with companies throughout the entire range of real estate and prop tech, from hospitality, which is currently on freeze for me and everyone else, to commercial real estate, multifamily. We also have white labels with design platforms, and just work directly with consumers as well, a little bit less. But what we've been doing a lot during this entire period is helping a lot of galleries, art institutions, artists to come online for the first time, since we've always operated as a virtual platform, and this entire market has had to reinvent itself overnight. It's been a really, really interesting set of months.
very interesting. So talk to us about how it's been playing out for you guys.
So, the initial, I think everybody went through the initial panic phase of what can we do, how can we get funds in as soon as possible. I personally created a model, a doomsday model of 6 months of zero revenue, and kind of like tested out our different cash elasticities. It's not what we're observing. We're actually observing that sales are still there, especially on the multifamily space. There's a lot of people stuck at home, so they're wanting to do home improvements. You're on Zoom all the time, and you can't just be on a blank wall. You see, I have like some nice artwork behind me, and it's just the artists are going through so much as well. A lot of them have had big shows that they've been waiting for years canceled, and there's no real perspective of coming back. I'm also a DJ on the side, and that entire side of my life has been completely canceled. I was supposed to play at the benefit for the Morgan Library, and they pushed it forward, and now they just told us that they're going to cancel it for the year. And I think it's what we're observing with a lot of social events. 2020 in general has been canceled. So for us as a business, it's bittersweet. Because we're absorbing a lot, and I think a lot of our competitors, our physical competitors, are not going to be here by the end of all of this. So for one side, it's very sad to think of where this industry is going to go, and how everything's going to end in the middle of the process. But we're doing our best to help people, to help creatives, to help institutions to create additional revenue streams as well.
Right. And I know that that's, before all of this happened, a big part of the talk that you gave that first week in March was turning the walls of buildings, traditionally cost centers, into revenue generation opportunities, and also a way of building somewhat of an emotional and personal connection to a space, which traditionally is something that the real estate industry has put a heavy emphasis on, and is kind of this big question mark of how do we quantify a return on investing in emotionally connecting people to our space or to their space, but then as a unit, as a building, and as a collective, to all the public spaces that we create. And so that's what we were talking about before any of this happened, and it sounds like that's still what you guys are focused on.
Yeah, 100%. I think now more than ever, it's important for companies to create an emotional connection, and to hand out information. So yesterday, for example, we had a webinar with Related for all of their residents on celebrating Earth Day, and we brought in artists that are using the arts as a tool to create transformation in sustainability. And a lot of these artists, they already have practices which are not necessarily reliant on physical spaces. They have virtual practices, they use VR, they use AR, they use autonomous vehicles to measure water quality all over the world, things that you wouldn't imagine, and things that can be applicable to every single resident in these buildings. So even if we're not talking about commercial spaces, we're still surrounded by walls within our homes, and our walls can be a very important tool for messaging, and they can be a great way for the owners of these buildings, or the developers of these buildings, to build out the messaging that they want for that specific community. And people are at a moment that they need to feel safe, and nothing empowers more hope than beauty.
I want to just show, let's talk a little bit about how it works. Let's see how you guys can see us best.
So the website is going through a complete redesign. We're launching like 5 new sections, which we fast-tracked because of everything that's going on. There's a whole new content platform, so a video platform where we're uploading content every week. We have weekly Q&As with artists. We have bi-weekly art professional talks. We're doing virtual shows. Yes, I see there's a question there. Can you have virtual shows? And it's not just us. Like all of the art fairs, which have been places that concentrate people and concentrate movements of the arts, for the first time in history, they've not only gone online, but they've published their prices online. And this for the market is a game changer, because we know that this market was not exactly transparent. And we were the first platform to actually go out there and put our prices on every single thing that we sold. And for a long time, we were criticized by it. The artists were like, this isn't supposed to be commercial. But at the same time, it is supposed to be commercial, because how can something be sustainable if it's not profitable?
Right. And I think that you talk, and I'm going to just show, this is like the gallery side of things. So you can go, right into the website. And again, we'll share the link with you guys in the comments after the stream. And you can shop art. And I think the value proposition for the commercial real estate industry, talk a little bit about, the experience generally, the QR codes we talked about, the copyright, the licensing, all of that.
100%.
Super interesting last time we chatted.
So we specialize in limited editions, and why we do that is due to how our supply chain works. So the building owner or their designer will fill out a simple questionnaire and say, this is my favorite style, and that questionnaire will then populate a virtual collection. So immediately curated by an AI in our platform. And that virtual collection can then be tested out into walls. Already, the client can either upload their own walls, or we can have someone in our team do that for them. And once you figure out the specs, the size, the framing colors, since everything is 100% customizable, an API will shoot over the selected works to a printer as close as possible to the end client. So our supply chain is intact, even in the middle of all of this. We've extended our delivery period in 1 day, but we still deliver in 7 to 8 now business days anywhere in North America, South America, or Europe. So it's a very, very simple process. And once the pieces are up in the buildings, we send out QR codes so that people walking by, even if they're socially distant, 6 feet apart, just leaving their apartment unit or coming into an office space, where I think the concentration of people in spaces is going to diminish greatly even after all of this. I don't think we're going to be seeing the amount of foot traffic that we've traditionally seen in Times Square or in museums, or I think that the amount of people is just going to be restricted, which means that these interactions are more important than ever, because you can just by yourself scan a QR code, learn about this piece, understand about this artist without having to see another human being.
Right.
And then by the click of a button, select if it works for your space, or if, and just make an order in the size that you want.
So people are really, so you're predicting, and it, it makes a lot of sense. Naturally, as there's fewer people, their experience with a building is very personal. And it's so interesting, right? Because over the last many years, we've seen commercial buildings hire community managers, just like you would have if you walk into a WeWork. There's somebody at the front, at the desk, as well as an iPad that checks you in. The person, don't get me wrong, is not checking you in, but they're there as a community manager to support your experience and help connect you to the building community. And so it seems like you're saying, which is, again, makes a lot of sense, that people are going to kind of move away from that and have more of an individualized experience with a place, which is, appealing and sad in a lot of ways. And eventually we'll be able to come back to, having community at the center of, physical real estate experience. But in the meantime, I totally understand how walking through a space, being able to scan a QR code and connecting with a piece of art, how important that could be in the months.
And I think it's even more, Mariel. We're seeing this now with this whole boom of Zoom events and webinars, etc. It's not that people have given up on communities. Communities are shifting to a virtual space. And so, the human beings need to live in community. So you can have a trigger when you scan a QR code that pulls up a video of the artist actually speaking to you, which creates a much more individual connection than, even going through a third party or a gallery manager or someone which was just going to hand you a piece of paper. So I think this whole thing has just fast-tracked technologies that had been there for a while. We've been using Zoom and video conferencing forever in the tech space. And we've been, working from home in the tech space for eternity as well. It's just the rest of the world has been having to catch up. So it's not that we're reinventing the wheel. We're just learning how to use things that exist.
Well, yeah, we have to retool a little bit and reprioritize based on our new reality. And I think that's a big driver. I mean, people have talked about, especially in real estate, how, you know, technology adoption now won't take 10 years, but will take, you know, it'll take us 18 months. I mean, that would be amazing. I don't think that's necessarily realistic. I think for some basic functions, and I think it's more about the psychology of how people think about technology than anything else. And that's the big win that we'll experience in our space, is that people's minds are open to the power of technology in such a substantial and vital way at this point that we can't go back, right? There's no going back to an older mentality of, oh, maybe I just don't need that, or I can put that on the back burner, or, you know, I'll get to that project later because, you know, it's an investment and we're not really sure how it will play out. No, now it's critical. Now technology is your business, no matter who you are.
But I still think it's a massive opportunity for the real estate sector, because people were still going to have to be within walls. That's what, you know, we're learning here. We need more space. It's not that we need less space. It just means we need to develop better, and we need to have technologies that, you know, leverage this development in a way.
Right. Well, it's interesting, right? Because for years and years, we've seen corporate real estate lease a surplus of space, right? There's always an extra percentage accounted for, you know, potential growth, always. And so for years, for the last, you know, at least 6 years since we've been around with DisruptCRE, we've seen a lot of technology companies tackle that issue of surplus, because it translates to real hard costs, significant hard costs, especially if you have a large portfolio of spaces. And to kind of downsize that with data, show how much extra there is, and be smart about making decisions for the future. And we're in this interesting moment where individually people require more space. You account for a person, you know, specific square footage per person. And that's, you know, where you saw WeWork and their densified model was you just had less square feet per person, right? And it's a lot of what made it an interesting, you know, formula. But we're in this moment where individually each person requires a lot more space, although there'll be a lot fewer people. So it is kind of
and I think it's kind of like, if you think of it, it's the impact is clearly positive for Class A office space. The big law firms are still going to need a lot of space. They're just going to need more space because, you know, you're not going to be able to have paralegals next to each other. You're going to have spread them out or whatever it is, because they still need to work in person.
This is the conversation, right? This is the conversation, because I don't know that they'll need more space. They won't have their whole population of workers coming back to work at any given time, right? At least for the foreseeable future. And so as we come back into workplaces, I think it will only time will tell, really. But I was talking about this with Andrew a little bit in the last segment. You do have a lot of global real estate firms that have seen, you know, maybe it could be virus outbreak, it could be, you know, energy grid malfunction, all kinds of different crises that have happened in parts around the world. Again, not all at one time, but they're more prepared for bringing people back. There are certain things that are in place that they've seen, they've done, they've tried, that they can help us come back. But I think until those people who ultimately will be leaders in our space to push these efforts forward when the time is right, until they come come to the table and put out their best practices and help tenants get back into their spaces, we just won't know
what's going to happen.
It's I agree. Like the layout, the artwork, everything, every part.
What's going to happen with home offices? That for me is a huge question, because especially in cities with high density like New York City, where people just use their apartments basically to sleep, and now they're being forced to do everything in their apartments, from exercise, work, and, you know, sleep as well. They're noticing that, you know, maybe they want to live in less denser areas where they can get more space.
Right.
There may be more development in the suburbs. I think the multifamily space is going to change tremendously.
Yeah.
And
then along with it, you know, cities as a whole, our infrastructure, our transportation. I mean, do you think, I've gotten this question so much just being in New York City in my apartment for the last, since we filmed with you guys in the beginning in March, I've been here. And so I get so many questions like, are you going to move out of New York City after this? Do you think there's going to be a mass exodus out of the city after this? And Well,
Yeah, it's a tough question.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, people will leave cities forever. I do think that probably a small population of people will try to look elsewhere. But it's interesting, right? How do you repurpose your personal space, your at-home space, to function as all of these different things? And I know, I don't have any kids, so my space in general doesn't have to cater to others right now. And so I've been able to make it functional for me. But I'm improvising even this, my little workplace here. It's not built for sitting here every day at this chair. I've never been, more appreciative of like really good, office furniture and, kind of the nature of having to sit in one place that's not really meant for it.
Yeah. And I think, the artwork can really help in productivity as well. I've been seeing a lot of cases, kids with like the parents are going crazy because, they have their kids running around the house all the time. And there are a lot of different studies that if you use soothing colors, you may be able to calm them down. It's the same thing for hospitals. It's the same thing for, psychology offices. If you go in, you'll see everything is very pastel, or there's blue, there's not a lot of red. So there's a lot of emotional effects that can come with the way that you design a space. And that's where, we can really be helpful as well. But on the other side I'm sorry, I got a little lost with the home office thing because I'm thinking of the question, leaving New York or not leaving New York.
It's a big one.
Yeah, it's a big one, and it's a big one, I guess, for a lot of people. I think the big question is, how are we going to rebuild? But at the end of the day, I miss my office. I don't know about you, but I miss coming into my office. I miss having my second screen. I miss having my workspace. I miss having all of my stuff up. I miss my office decoration. And I think we're not alone. I think a lot of people are at home saying, when can I go back to my office? Like, right. And how can we make this office safe? Like, is the WeWork model safe? That's what we should be asking each other. Can we sit next to someone on a daily basis?
Definitively no at this point to that question.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting, I think office design is one of the more interesting things that I've been thinking about lately, because for so long we've been grappling with this kind of open floor plan, closed floor plan, cubicles, shared, public amenity spaces. And I think the consensus in the last couple of years is neither one. Whatever, you need variety. People need choice based on tasks that they have to perform that day, based on the people they meet, based on what they want to accomplish, and based on how they're feeling, right? So you give people choice. But I think this is a whole new world of, it's not just your company brand that comes through in your workplace strategy anymore. It's safety and regulations. And are we going to comply? I can imagine that there's going to be a whole new set of regulations and standard as it relates to the built environment due to public safety, and that's a new kind of.
And that's where messaging and creating clear guidelines can really pair together well with design. So, for example, if you have a beautiful piece which was designed, for a COVID campaign, we're seeing a lot of artists that are working with COVID and with different things. You can have an augmented reality trigger and make it educational. Like, this is the distance that you should be standing apart, or, this is the whatever it is, but it's a very simple trigger. So you can have this as almost a training program when anyone is coming back into the office, because we're all going to have to learn the new rules, right?
Right.
So
I can't imagine relying on just email communication to do its job well enough to really keep people mindful of how they should be using and interacting with the space. I think it has to be more than that.
It has to be in your face. And that's the thing. An image really does tell 1,000 stories. So you can use that image to make it convey a message that it's going to stick with someone. It's what we've done in the past for our environmental campaigns, for example, like the ocean conservation campaign that we did. The works had augmented reality triggers with facts of things that you could bring to your daily life that would change your impact on the world. Like if you stop using plastic bags, New York City used to use before the plastic bag ban 40,000 plastic bags a minute. So think of, using one less.
That's crazy. That sounds
and it's simple statistics that you can just add to beauty. And once again, beauty touches the heart, it touches the soul. It's a much easier thing for people to relate to.
Right. Well, I think what's amazing about what you guys do is you really connect that like for me, like art is a leisurely interest, if you will, but you really connect it to through technology to more of an experience, to more of an interactivity between a person and a piece or a space or whatever, wherever you happen to be. But I think there's a little bit of magic in that. And I think when we last spoke, and I want to share our video, our chat soon, maybe next week, but
I want to see it.
you really talked about also kind of ownership of a piece of art and traditionally how it goes versus kind of what you guys are able to bring to the table through. Are you guys using what kind of ledger?
Blockchain. Yeah, we're using EOS. So basically, how it works is our images are they're always limited editions. So if you buy the 1 of 20, yours is the 1 of 20. In fact, I buy the 2 of 20, mine is the 2 of 20. And once you receive the piece, it'll have a QR code on the back, and it'll link back to your own wallet. We call it a vault, where you have your collection of little digital certificates, which means that if your building is struck by a fire, a natural disaster, whatever it is, you still own the copyright to all of those images, and we can get them to you reprinted. And if you want to trade them in the future, if you're a hotel and you know that your asset cycle is of 7 years, you can come back to us and we'll either have them repurposed, or you can get back to the platform. Sometimes you bought an artist and that artist has gained a lot of value, he's become a next big star, he can and you're not interested in having a very expensive piece in your lobby or whatever it is, but you want more pieces because you're opening more buildings, you're opening at different regions, but so you own the copyright of that said image in perpetuity, which is quite interesting. But something that's really powerful as well on the moment that we're living in is we're going to see a lot of new communities popping up because people have to be more localized, right? They're not going to be commuting as much. I'm not going to take the subway anymore. Like right now, wherever I can go is wherever I can ride my bicycle to, and that's it. And I think that's going to be a trend for a lot of different people. And for building owners, this is really, really an opportunity to connect with your local artists, your local communities, have virtual events with them, have them, telling the story of their artwork, have them, connecting with all of your residents, show them that you're empowering the creatives, and especially through these extremely hard times.
We have a couple of just comments. I don't know if these are so much questions, but I think the need for personal space isn't going away, and companies may be looking to lease larger spaces than previously, so people can have more space to feel safe. Again, part of our interesting.
I agree.
I really want to call it a debate. I really hope people in the industry are talking about this, and I think it should be it's certainly for me the topic of discussion. I've been talking to a lot of people about this, but I don't know. I don't feel confident one way or the other to say that people will need more space or less. I feel like we've been going off of this notion that we, and like one of the slides with Andrew from the last segment is we're growing into a fixed amount of space. Like we have, for a long time, people in our industry have said we're never going to need more office space than we have now, right? It's a matter of retooling. A multifamily is really different, because it's totally different shape, especially around the country. We do need more multifamily, but when it comes to office, like we talked about, corporate companies have been taking more space, a surplus of space, as kind of the baseline for their leases for a long time due to unknown growth. And that is just, how the nature of the business and corporate real estate. And I think people are getting a little bit smarter to that, especially as flexible office has come online and become an option, and people are able to diversify. People are able to diversify their portfolio. So you don't have to have one large corporate headquarters. You could have a smaller, larger headquarters, corporate office, satellite offices, and then a flex office or some sort of co-working solution in the mix to suit growth. And so I think because of that, we've been in this downward trajectory of leasing space more than needed. People are even downsizing. it does feel strange to think that people may want to lease more space than they previously had.
If I may, I think we might need less people.
That's what we're doing
We
here.
might need less people fixed in a space, but we're gonna need more space per people that are permanent.
Right.
That's a fact.
That's true. But are
that's 100% a fact. And the spaces that exist are gonna have to be better. They're gonna have to be amazing, because the companies they're gonna need amazing offices to make people feel safe in coming within an office building. You're gonna have to provide the best quality in sensors, the best design, show them that you're, thinking of every different safety precaution.
Right.
And I think, once again, I'm super bullish on commercial class A office space. So the big law firms, the big banks, these guys are going to need more space. The banks have said that they're not going to let go of a single person this year. Once they bring them back, they're not going to be able to come back and sit. I used to work in a bank. So I used to work next to 1 million people in a hedge fund with 1 million Bloombergs. We were all on top of each other, and, everybody's screaming. Right. It's a model it's not safe.
No.
It's worse than we work in a way.
Right.
So think of these guys, because these guys are the big tenants. That's what really matters at this point in time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's going to be interesting. I
Class
think
I'm with you. I think, there's going to be a lot less small law firms in offices. They might just work from home, or they're going to transition. But, the Class A office space it's a big market to be in right now.
And I really don't know. I think it's just interesting to have these conversations and hear what others think. At the end of the day, none of us really know. And it will be interesting, right? Because each corporate tenant has their whole own culture and philosophy on what they do in general, let alone kind of what they're going to be up to now moving forward. And so I don't think we're going to see this manifest in any one specific way, to be totally honest. I think it's going to come in a lot of different flavors, and it's going to have to be a little bit of trial by error. Those companies that have offices overseas in places like China that have already brought their workforce back to some extent, those are companies who naturally have insights into how things are going to play out if they do certain things one way or another, or, from a humanities standpoint, how people cope with certain, either design decisions or safety decisions. Could be air quality decisions. Obviously that could be a big component as well. And so I think those companies are in a little bit more of a strategic position. And those, of course, are the companies that you're talking about, those large corporate tenants that want the Class A office space. So it will be interesting. I think it's so subjective, and it makes it a little bit more fun to talk about, I think, than just kind of knowing things, are going to work out in any particular way.
Yeah, it's what a time to be alive. What a time
to be alive. That is for sure. And I think, one of the reasons that I wanted to just host this show in general, and I said it last week, is to connect people to each other, have some of these interesting conversations, but also talk about some of the positive wins, the things that people are able to accomplish during this time. Because I think that, especially in our industry, the fact that people are going to have adopted technology in some sort of foundational way that ultimately we can build on when life starts coming back to us, whatever that means. It'll be a new normal, so I won't say back to normal, but it's a foundation. It's a foundation that we can build on. So I'm excited to see kind of all of the innovation that's going to come out on the other side. I mean, we're both entrepreneurs, and we know kind of just how even we work. There are a lot of folks like us that are, thinking creatively, retooling, and coming to the table with new ideas. And so,
it's a time for creativity and for design. That's essential. I think every tenant is it's exactly what you said. Every tenant is going to be different in what they demand from the space, and what it is that is. So the landlord's going to have either a virtual design team that he brings on per use, or a lot of different agencies. We have a partner which is a founder in another company in the design space. The company's called Mine, and he's a former SVP at Restoration Hardware, so he knows the design space very well. He knows high class furniture, and he's betting big on how the developers are going to let go of their in-house design teams, which are used to doing their things their own way, and is going to be working with more startups, which are more flexible and where everything really counts, and giving entire projects to startups. This is the new like BlackRock office on Hudson Yards. Like, instead of having our related design team develop it, let's, maybe partner. We'll have a smaller design team in house, and we'll partner with 5 different startups. So this one can have this face, this one can have the other face, and we can deliver different results. And I think that's an interesting path for us to go forward, because that's where innovation really happens.
Well,
So
I mean, we needed that in real estate for such a long time, because I think the best ideas come out of a variety of perspectives, right? And so when you can have everybody from a different perspective coming at the same problem or challenge, that's when magic happens. And I think that's what we've been missing for a long time in commercial real estate. Is I think there's this culture of, I'm doing what I do and this is my secret sauce, and I'm not really going to come to the table and share those wins, right? Because everybody else is looking for the same secret sauce. And so if instead of that mentality, we can come to the table and say, well, I've experienced these successes this year, let me share, and therefore expect others to share their success, right? So we can all look at that and hopefully move forward in a positive way. It's no different than looking externally to a sandbox of startups to solve a problem than looking at your internal group that already tackles design, construction, whatever these traditional functions, leasing, and expect a different result, right? So I think it's kind of about time that these real estate, companies, especially those larger ones with significant influence, come to the table and approach the innovators that we know are out there doing interesting things to be more creative with the functions.
Yeah. Right now, what we're experiencing is the clients that we already had are very open to talking and to understanding how we can move forward. But we're not even trying to prospect new clients, because everybody's kind of like just trying to figure out their own problems first to then move forward. I think maybe Q2 or Q3, when we see where the bottom is on this whole thing, because since we don't even know where the bottom is, everybody's like kind of like running around chasing their tails and figuring out, oh, but maybe we'll come back in May, maybe we'll come back in June, maybe, we have a client which is a co-working space, and they just renewed our contract for another year to do the same thing. And we're like, we renewed the contract. We were very happy with it, because for us, it's great. We do, the rotating shows for them, but we have to talk about how these shows are going to look. Are we actually going to have art openings where we invite 100 people into the space? Do we think that anybody's going to come to that? Or maybe should we be developing a much more digital component to this whole thing, where, the person receives all of the content on the show on their desks? And that changes as well on FFA requirements, because a lot of these what these building management tools were doing is they'd have wine and cheese nights, or they'd have social gatherings with the tenants, and that was the perk that they were giving to justify their existence. So what are they going to provide now? They're going to have to provide, once again, a technological solution.
Are there any things that you've seen, as we're just wrapping up here, are there any things that you've seen in the last, I don't know, couple of months since we last saw each other that have been really, really surprising for you?
Yes. One thing that was really surprising, we were in the process, like, this was, quarantine had started, COVID had like gone crazy already, and California shut down first, and they were sheltering in place, and we were in the process of signing a contract with a new client, and I was commercial real estate class A. I was sure they were going to disappear, and they paid our retainer. The retainer arrived last week. Which was really shocking. So they're still continuing development. They're basically just waiting for shelter in place orders to lift, because they want to deliver a good product. I think they're companies that are thinking ahead of the curve. Like, we want to have our buildings perfectly designed for whenever people are authorized to come back in.
Right.
The other thing, let's see, what's been really shocking. We started sending out weekly investor updates to our entire investor network, and the investors have been so engaged. Nobody's making any investments at the moment, but they're watching everything.
Right.
Basically, like, our open rates are over 60%, which for a newsletter, you send out newsletters, is extremely high. Like, they're It's extremely high, which means they're interested, they're watching. But on the investment side, that there's been another trend, which was a little surprising to me, is they're putting companies in three boxes, right? Companies in the red, which have 2 months of runway, which need immediate attention now. Companies in the green, which are companies which are benefiting from the crisis. So, they sell hand sanitizer, or they do deliver groceries, whatever it is that's just immediately very positively impacted. So they're doing rounds for growth. And companies that are in the middle, that are kind of like, we can survive this, we have runway left for maybe 10 months or 11 months, are completely ignored. Like, it's like you're in a space that you're safe for now. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. So go do your thing. And that's been like, we've talked to a lot of founders recently, and it's what everybody's experiencing, even with your own investors. It's not even to new investors.
Right.
It's, portfolio companies.
Sure. I think that's super interesting. It makes a lot of sense. Is there anything that you are kind of excited to see happen in the immediate or hopeful for in the long term that you want to share?
Well, I can't wait till, all of the buildings out there have virtual art presences where we can put our QR codes in every building, because it's something that just must happen. It's such an added value, and for a quarter of the cost of their old art programs. So I feel like this is going to be a massive expansion moment for us at the end of this crisis.
That's fantastic.
And just to add a little bit on the side, I don't know if anybody's tracking, but we're closing up an equity crowdfunding campaign in 5 days. We actually surpassed our goal. We're at 160% of our minimum goal.
Amazing.
It was kind of like a little cash pillow that we wanted to put together during the panic phase of, we need to get more cash in during this whole thing. And in the past, I think 2 or 3 weeks, we raised $40,000 from 130 individual investors, which is crazy. It's just like random people that have never heard of us, and just related with the message and wanted to invest $100, $200, $1,000. It's like micro investors.
Maybe they saw your video on.
Maybe they saw our video.
We'll share this with everyone as well in the comments after the stream, this video, so you guys can go check out and Manuela, give them a little kind of intro to what this video is about.
So the video is about how to monetize walls, basically. How can you transfer walls from being cost centers to being revenue generators? And this is now more important than ever for, buildings that are looking for ways that they can not just expand their community reach, but how can they add additional revenue streams? And, this is something that can be run remotely. We don't necessarily have to have people walking through the buildings. We can have campaigns like we have with Related, where we onboard with their tenant experience apps, and we have our entire portfolio of artwork available for purchase remotely. So, if your tenants are at home and they want to make improvements to their home office, this is a great way for you to keep the conversation open with them and maybe open a new additional revenue stream.
So interesting. So you're saying that a lot of buildings that have tenant engagement apps or some sort of centralized communication are still putting new art out into their virtual marketplaces and engaging with their tenants in this way.
100%, because it creates content. So we're doing webinars as well, kind of explaining how to navigate the art world, interesting artist Q&As, and so it's a great way for them to be connected with their tenants, even if the tenants are not in the building, and it's a great way for tenants to create better versions of their homes. Like, we know we haven't spent this amount of time at home in forever. We all need to change a little something in our homes to make it a little better.
So that's very interesting. But in the same way, even if somebody isn't purchasing a piece for their home, they're still connected to the building through something that
it's a perk the building is giving,
that they see that the building owner has invested in their own space, even though we're not physically there.
Yeah. So it's keeping the community alive.
I love it. So you talk about in this talk, translation of traditionally walls being cost centers into revenue generating opportunities. You talk about, I think just a little bit, or maybe it was in our conversation, just what, you guys have used this encrypted ledger on blockchain to transfer ownership, and that decision. And then just kind of the future of connecting with art digitally, ownership, all of that good stuff.
And this was all pre-coronavirus.
Well, it sounds like not for you. It sounds like it was right in the midst, which is so crazy. I can't even believe that. All right. Well, I'm going to link some of these things that we talked about, including Manuela's video, in the comments right now, since it's 12:15, and we'll wrap up here. Manuela, thanks so much for being with us. I'm glad that you're doing so well.
Thank you, Mariel.
It's really nice to hear from you. So I will look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Take care. Bye, everyone.